Hey everybody, welcome to the John Wick Excommunicado podcast. So this is actually episode number 27, and it's been 3 months since my last podcast. So very excited to get back into the swing of things. A lot going on right now. We're only going to touch maybe a little tip of the iceberg today towards the end of the podcast, but I've got a really exciting guest on the podcast. He may not think so, but I do want to welcome JollyRoga, ex fighter pilot, current pilot. A lot of questions for him, but I'm gonna call you Jolly if that's okay. How's it going, man? What have you been into? And if you don't mind, just telling everybody a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Yeah, it's great to finally meet you. I've been following you on Twitter, and I know you've been bashed a bunch there, but yeah, it's great to finally meet you. As far as my background, I went to college at the Citadel. That's a military college in South Carolina. I got commissioned in the Air Force in '81. Started out in the F4 overseas in Korea and Germany, and I was a backseater. So if you watch Top Gun, I was like Goose in the F4, and then I got selected to go to pilot training, which is difficult to do from the back seat. They send about 25 guys a year. So I went to pilot training, and because I had all that time in the back seat, flying from the back seat, all those guys that I flew with taught me to fly an airplane, taught me to fly a jet. Pilot training for me was kind of a very enjoyable experience versus guys washing out of training. So when I went to pilot training in Oklahoma, we started with about 65 guys and we graduated like 33. And
Okay.
two of us got F-15s. Good friend of mine and I got F-15s, and we're still good friends today. In fact, he's very awake.
Mhm.
Let's just say that. In fact, he got laid off at his airline because he wouldn't take the jab, for what it's worth. Um, but I flew Eagles most of my career. Great airplane. And then I had a small stint in Arizona training new pilots in the T-38, which is a supersonic trainer.
Mhm.
And then I had a 2-year hiatus in the F-106, which is it's an older 50s, 60s jet that we were using as a target platform, doing test support, missile tests and stuff like that. But the 106 for its day was very advanced, and
Mhm.
I loved flying it. It was fast as hell, really fast. I had one going 1.8, and it wanted to go faster. I had the Eagle going a couple of times, like 2.1, 2.2, which in miles per hour would be like 16, 1700 miles an hour, somewhere in there. Um, but it took like a half a gas to get there, whereas the 106 just walked out to Mach 1.8, and it just wanted to go faster, like I said.
Now,
So that's my flying background, and then I went to the airlines, and I've been a 777 captain here at FedEx, or I can't tell you where I'm at.
yeah, no, you're good. So, so backing up a little bit because I mean, first off, I'm not, the whole joke on my Twitter is and I don't know if you've seen it or not, Jolly, but I put that asterisk in there on my Twitter account, not an authorized pilot, which is which I'm not.
Yeah,
I would love to go up in a Blue Angel one day. That's on my
yeah,
bucket list.
right.
But my question with you specifically, when did you kind of decide that you wanted to fly?
Well, that's a good question because like I said, started at the Citadel, which is a military college, and I wanted to go in the Army. My brother-in-law was in the Army. He was a chopper pilot. Um, and I really wanted to be a ranger and a grunt and lead troops. But as it turned out, I was an engineer in college, and the Air Force offered me a scholarship, and the Army didn't. So it really came down to money.
Mhm.
I was like, man, I need to pay for college, and I don't want to borrow a ton of money. So I went with the Air Force because they agreed to pay for college
Mhm.
when I got an ROTC scholarship. So as part of that, I had to go to a summer camp, and they gave us a ride in a trainer, T-37, which is a side-by-side primary jet trainer. And
Mhm.
we did spins and rolls and all that shit. And excuse my French.
No, you're
Um,
good.
and I came back to college and I said, "Hey, is there any way I could fly? Because I don't want to fix screen doors and mow lawns as a civil engineer." So my advisor said, "Well, we don't need any more pilots, but we need navigators. Would you want to be a navigator?" And I said, "Okay." So I went to Mather Air Force Base in California, learned I had to get my nav wings, and then I was fortunate enough to get an F4,
Hmm.
and that's where I was like, "Whoa, I want to do this the rest of my life." But it was kind of a late thing. Like I was 22 when I figured out that flying jets was something that I just fell in love with. I never thought about flying before I was really, when I had that tweet ride.
Hmm.
I was probably 21 or 20 when I had it. That was the first thought I ever had of flying, and just fell in love with it. And fortunately, everything fell into place, and I was able to eventually go to pilot training, and I feel very blessed and very fortunate to have done what I got to do for about 21 years. It was just a dream come true. Awesome. I thank God every day I got to strap a jet on my back and take it for a ride, because it was really a privilege and an honor to do it.
Yeah, I bet. You know, I always wanted to go in the Coast Guard Academy. That was my thing when I was in high school, and
Mhm,
my I had my eyes set on being a helicopter pilot for the Coast Guard. That was just
mhm,
something that I wanted to do. I saw it as rewarding, um, and I was very, very close to making that next step. But I also got accepted at the University of Kentucky,
mhm,
and I kind of took the easy way out and did that route. But
mhm.
long story short, I didn't end up finishing college anyway. So,
Yeah,
but honestly, I wish that I would have gone to the Coast Guard. Um, and
yeah.
that's I don't want to say it's a regret because I wouldn't be where I am today, but that is one of the choices I wish I would have made.
I just, I feel strongly that like God puts us on a path,
Hmm.
and we get, you know, sent in a direction that now I did put a lot of effort into, but my plan changed. It morphed along the way. First I wanted to be a grunt, and then I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll be goose for a while in the back seat. And then it was, holy shit, excuse my French again. I could actually do this in the front seat if I do a good job. And it just all worked out. And like I said, I feel very blessed. It took a lot of work, but it was all worth it.
Hmm.
And, it's, but who knows? Because I lost a lot of friends flying jets, and and I'm a spiritual person. I'm not a Bible beater by any stretch, and I'm not a perfect person. I'm a sinner just like everybody. But
Hmm.
um, I think that God puts us on a path for a reason. So
Right.
whatever path He put you on, there was a reason for it, brother.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm a firm believer in that. And so kind of staying along the same lines of the flying piece and how you got your start. What and and this is the crazy thing about having somebody like you on is I could talk to you for hours. So having to
Mm,
to condense that down into things that I really want to ask. Um,
yeah.
what what feeling did you have the first time that you went up in a jet, and which jet was it?
It was the F4. Actually, right, a T-37, but really the first fighter jet I was in the F4, and the F4 is, of course, like a Vietnam era kind of
Mhm. You're talking about the
historic.
Phantom.
The Phantom, very historical, great airplane, but man, it was that first flight in the Eagle that I'll just never forget, because what McDonnell Douglas made both airplanes. They made the F4 in the late 50s, early 60s. They designed the airplane, and it became the primary fighter in Vietnam.
Mhm.
And then they realized there were some maneuverability issues with the airplane, along with some radar limitations and some weapons limitations. And these guys if you want to read a book about how the Air Force kind of morphed into the F-15 and the F-16, there's a guy named John Boyd, and the name of the book is Boyd.
Okay.
And they called it the fighter mafia at the Pentagon. And those were the guys that designed the F-15, the F-16, and the A-10, which were the three primary jets for us.
Mhm.
They still are primary jets.
Mhm.
So when I went from the F4 to the Eagle, it was a very smooth transition because they're both McDonnell Douglas. They're very similar hydraulic systems, similar electrical systems. It's just they took everything about the F4 that was wrong with it and they fixed it in the Eagle. It's very maneuverable. The F4 was not as maneuverable, not even close. The radar was far superior. The weapons were superior. It was an air superiority fighter. So the job of the F-15C, which is what I flew, was to obtain air superiority, which means we want to own surface to the moon so we can have free reign over enemy territory with the A-10 and the F-16. And they can just blow the living shit out of targets on the ground. And so that was our job, either to make the MiGs run or shoot them down. I got a buddy of mine from college, Cesar Rodriguez, who has 3 kills. I have none, but I flew some combat, and it was just it was a hoot. And but yeah, the Eagle owned the skies for all of the 80s, all of the 90s, until the Raptor came along, the F-22, which is the next leap. But the Eagle still complements the Raptor a lot. They work together a lot, and the radar's been up. So like when I got checked out in the F-15 in the 80s, we had great radar. We had our primary missile was the AIM-7, which is a radar guided missile. And then we had a heat missile called the AIM-9. And we had a gun. And but to employ those weapons, they were good weapons, required a lot of work. It was intense. It was really difficult to become proficient at it. And then we went into the 90s and we got newer radars and newer weapons like the AMRAAM. The AMRAAM is a launch and leave weapon, meaning that you launch it. I could sing a song for you about it if you'd like, but you launch the weapon, you get a data link in your cockpit from the weapon. When it acquires the target, it's essentially on its own, and you can break lock and turn around and not expose yourself to that threat.
So it's basically like a honing missile, like self sustained from the point of lock on.
It goes active. When it goes active, meaning it has the target, it doesn't need any further support from the host airplane, the mothership. You can just you're basically, it's on its own, and it's in kill mode, and you can't recall it. Whatever it's locked onto, it's going to go after. You can snip it at a point where, same thing with the AIM-7, which was the precursor to that. AIM-7 is a lot bigger, but the AIM-7, you could always break lock right up until impact, and it wouldn't track the target. Whereas the AIM-120 or AMRAAM, if you launch that, and once it went active, there was no recalling that sucker. So you better make sure your ID had to be solid before you launch. That's true with any missile, but the AIM-120 was totally just changed. It was a game changer. It changed our tactics. It changed the way we employed the airplane. And most airplanes carry AIM-120s now, except for the A-10 because it doesn't have a radar. But the F-16 carries AIM-120s. The F-15E carries them. That's what the Raptor uses. That's what the F-35 uses. But now these are AIM-120s or AMRAAMs that are even more advanced, because my data points are 20 years ago. So there have been so many advancements in the last 20 years to primarily weapons, but also radars. It's like the F-15 isn't the same airplane it was when I flew it in the 80s. And I could see that in the 90s when I flew it. It was a different airplane. When I checked out on it again, I was like, oh man, we had some unbelievable stuff on the airplane that we didn't have in the 80s. And now, think about 2022, the F-15 in many ways is on par with the F-22 in terms of capability. However, it's not stealthy like the F-22 is. The F-22 is designed to be a very low radar cross-section airplane. In other words, it's invisible to radar to a point. So the F-15 will never be invisible. It's too big, and the intakes are huge, and a lot of the radar return will come off of those things. So
did you now, and I know, I think different pilots will call it different things, but you've got your blue water operations and then your brown water operations. Now, did you ever fly like carrier operations and ever land on a carrier?
only as a guest. I didn't fly an airplane on board. I went out to the Independence in the Gulf. We were out. We were deployed there for 4 or 5 months, and I got buddied up with a Hornet guy off the Indy because he got stuck in Bahrain where I was, and he didn't have anything. He didn't have a toothbrush, he didn't have jack. So we kind of took care of him. So we had me and another guy come out to the boat, and I got to spend a couple of nights out there, which was really cool. So we got a trap on a cod, which is basically, it looks like I think it's a C2.
Mhm.
It looks a lot like an E2 without the radar dome on top. So we went out to the boat, and then he had me all hooked up to get a right seat cat launch I was going to be in the right seat of an E2, and the admiral found out about it and said, NFW, that ain't happening.
You were so close too.
Yeah. So I ended up on the LSO platform with an LSO, but that's a long answer to your question. But no, I never did any carrier ops. I was a land-based pilot. There are some Air Force pilots who did exchange tours with the Navy, and they got checked out in Hornets, and they were basically carrier ops for 3 years while they were on exchange. And we took Navy guys in our squadrons, and they flew with us, and they all said, you guys know how good you have it, because they're stuck on a boat, and
Yeah,
there's
there's
no
not
booze on
really.
the boat.
I was listening to another podcast the other day. It was actually about, I can't remember the name of it, but it was about the F-22 Raptor, and
Yep.
the fighter pilot on there. He said, it's a little different when you're flying on a carrier because you've got fuel to take into account, and then of course you've also got the small landing space and cable you got to worry about. So I was
Oh,
just, I
it's
mean, I couldn't
unbelievable.
imagine.
Yeah, I mean, those guys spend, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, half their time working on and concentrating on takeoffs and landings because they're so critical and so dangerous that's coming on board the ship, especially at night in pitching seas and the weather. That's that'll take years off your life.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I can imagine.
and like that night that I was with the LSO, this would have been like 97, 98. And we're doing combat ops in Iraq, Southern Watch stuff. Anyway, this Tomcat comes back on board, F-14, and he had a flap issue. So he's hot, he's fast coming on board. And I'm with the LSO, and I have a headset, and I'm right next to him. And this guy comes on board, and he's, I don't know if you're familiar, but there's like 4 wires, and they're trying to catch the 3 wire, which is the cable on the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going, kind of not quite the same way the ship's going. It's the angle deck that they're landing on, whereas the launch is happening right off the bow. I hear this guy screaming that he's, a little hot or high or something. He finally comes on board. He skips all the wires, doesn't catch any of them. And when they hit the deck, whether it's a Hornet or not, they advance their power to full,
Mm-hmm.
just in case they don't catch the wire. So you could tell, because he was high and he had his power back, that when he hit the deck, the power was back. I mean, it was, as opposed to it was like, when he came on board. So the LSO is screaming bolter, which means go to burner and get back airborne. The air boss who's up in the tower is screaming bolter. And this guy disappears off the edge. This is nighttime. Disappears off the edge of the deck, and I can't see him anymore. And then you see his burners light off, and all you could see was the glow from the burners. You couldn't see the jet. And he actually flew underneath the bow. I mean, under the bow, not like but below the bow. That's how low he was. He was probably, I don't know, 15, 20 feet off the water with the burners cooking. And then you see him climb out at a pretty steep angle. And the air boss is screaming for him to eject. And there's 2 people in it, right? So I'm just listening to this whole thing as an innocent bystander, as an observer. And I'm going, holy shit. Wow. And so this guy climbs out at like a 30-degree, 35-degree angle at night, cancels the burner, levels off. And then there's discussion between him and the boss about whether to come on board or not. And they pretty much made the decision he wasn't coming on board. And they sent him to shore to spend a night because he probably needed to change his underwear. So,
yeah, I'd say so, and that was one of the questions I was going to ask you, and feel free to tell another one. But I was going to ask you what is one of the craziest things that you've ever seen, and I'm sure that's probably one of them. But.
I've come close aboard to people that I didn't see until I was close to board. In other words, we're 180 out, we're opposite directions, and I got him on radar. But what I didn't maybe see was his wingman.
Mhm.
And we dust each other off within, say, 100 feet with a closure rate of 1,000 knots, because I'm doing 500 and he's doing 500. And it happened so fast that you're like, holy shit, I almost died. And I have friends who have not been that fortunate, who have been in that same scenario where they actually did scrape paint
Wow.
and either had to eject or they were killed. Um, so that's probably when it, I guess I would have died relaxed because I didn't see the guy. But but the scariest moment I ever had, believe it or not, was with a student. And I told this story during my interview, my job interview, because they asked me, "Hey, tell me something you screwed up and you learned something from it." So I was with this student pilot. He had a solo the T-38 on his next ride, and he's not getting it down in the touchdown zone. And he's hot, and it's out in Arizona. It's a hot day, and that makes it more difficult. But anyway,
Mhm.
I said, "Hey, dude, I'm going cold mic, which means I'm turning the intercom off." I go, "You're solo right now. Put this one down and you're going solo on your next ride." And we were down to one. We had enough gas for one pass.
Mhm.
So he puts it down, but in all jets, especially Delta wings, you aero brake. In other words, you keep the nose in the air, and that helps slow the airplane down once you touch down, especially if you don't have a drag chute.
Mhm.
And then you fly the nose down to the ground and apply brakes. And that's typically the way you stop a jet. And so he didn't aero brake at all. And we're just rolling down the runway and he's not on the brakes. And I'm watching these boards come by, which indicate how much runway we have left. And we got to the 3 board and we're still doing like 110 knots, which would be like 130 miles an hour. And I put the mic on and I said, "Hey, I got the airplane." So I took the airplane, one college try on the aero brake, and then I went feet to the floor, blew both tires, and the airplane was out of control. And we went off into the dirt on the left side of the runway, and my one tire was airborne. In other words, the airplane almost rolled.
Wow.
So we got out of the shut it down, got out. This colonel comes out to meet me, and he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, Jolly, how's it going?" I go, "Well, sir, not so good." I go, I I let my student go way too far. I took the airplane way too late. I had to do everything right. As you can see, I didn't. So fast forward now, I don't get grounded. I'm flying with a student the next day. He drops me off at the squadron. And so I see this colonel at the bar on Friday night. And I'm like, "Hey, boss, I really fully expected to have to pee in a bottle and be grounded for a week. I don't know why you're so kind to me." He said, "Well, as soon as you admitted that it was your fault and you screwed up, I had no issues because
Mhm.
you owned it. You didn't try and pawn it off on your student."
Mhm.
So that was a big lesson for me. And
Yeah.
I tell the story to a lot of people because it's like, when you own your mistakes, people trust you and respect you a lot more.
Mhm.
Whereas if you're trying to, blame your student or blame somebody else for your shit, it's just, you're not going to be, looked upon with a lot of respect, I think. And so I think it's more important to own your mistakes than it is to try and cover them up and pretend they
Yeah.
didn't happen. And that was
I
definitely
I agree 1,000%. And honestly, man, that took me a long time to learn.
yeah.
Um, and one of my favorite books, I'll drop a book right here. I don't get paid anything for mentioning anything, but one of my favorite books is Five Marks of a Man, and
Huh.
um, it's my old pastor in Cincinnati, Ohio, but he talks about the 5 marks of a man, and he talks about how a man always does work. A man is a protector. A man
Yeah.
owns his mistakes.
Yeah.
But but
Right.
but what you nailed it on the head right there. It took me a long time to figure out,
Mhm.
if you continue to lie or if you continue to do people wrong, it'll catch
Mhm.
up to you. Um,
Yeah.
and part of
Yeah.
being a man is just owning up, like you said.
And I've made plenty of mistakes, and
Mhm.
some of them I've tried to cover up, and usually that doesn't go so well.
Yeah.
It's better that you just get it out and go, "Hey, I screwed up, and this is what happened."
Yeah.
And there may be consequences, but those are better consequences than later on discovering that you lied about it or you tried to hide it or you just didn't want to own it because your ego wouldn't let you, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. You're
So,
100% right, sir. So,
and then Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you going to say?
So that story was, I've come close to death several times. But that one is the story I usually tell, the 38 story. And I've lost a lot of friends, and it just, by the grace of God, I was spared what my friends, it was just bad. I believe that when God says it's your time, it's your time.
Yeah.
And you don't have a lot of control over that. So I don't live with reckless abandon, but I'm a risk taker, and I just feel like, I'm not going to do really stupid shit, not anymore anyway. But so I used to when I was younger, I thought I was bulletproof,
Yeah, we
and
all
you're
did.
just not.
Yeah.
Take stupid risk. I still take a lot of risk but I just feel like when it's your time, it's your time, and we don't have control of that. And so that's losing friends is all part of that. You kind of accept it, and um, we have traditions in the Air Force, and the Navy does the same thing. When you lose a buddy, there's things you do. You toast them, and you tell stories, and it's a celebration of who they were. And then you have the whole military funeral thing, and it's a tearjerker, but at the same time, it kind of warms your heart to see that we honor people that have made the sacrifice that they did. And yeah, I've been to enough of those that I don't want to go to anymore, but I fully expect I will. It's just, just the way it is.
Well, and like you said, you were one of the lucky ones, and you gave a couple of great examples.
Yeah.
How close you came, and
Yeah.
I just want
Yeah.
you to know before we go any further, I do appreciate your service, and
Yeah.
I could never do what you did, or
Oh,
even
sure.
what you do, but
Don't sell yourself short. You don't know. I'm not a saint. I'm not a perfect man. I'm a sinner. I've made mistakes. I've been blessed, and I live it one day at a time, and God has a plan for all of us, and I'm just trying to follow his plan for me, whatever that is.
Absolutely, man. Well, I do. So I've got one, and this is a can of worms. I'm sure you'll agree with it here, but I want to I want to wrap this podcast up with, and we talked about it before, but just slowly transitioning into another one that we do where we go more in depth on this particular topic. But
Yeah.
in 2 minutes or less,
Uh-huh.
how what do you think of the current situation with
Mhm.
Russia, Ukraine, and now the
Mhm.
US? And kind of
Mhm.
what's your take on that? And what can you tell us? What can you not tell us?
Well, like we talked before the podcast, I still do have some pretty good contacts in the
Mhm.
military. Some are at high levels, and um, and that's not where this. Most of this is coming from research that I've done on my own. The
Mhm.
statement I'm about to make, I really feel like this whole Russia Ukraine thing is a huge distraction, and I think it's orchestrated. I think to me, I mean, you've heard the term false flag.
Mhm.
I almost feel like it fits in that category where they're trying to take our eye off the real target, which is what's going on in our own country
Mhm.
with our, I believe, corrupt government. Our southern border obviously is toast.
Mhm.
All this vaccine mandate BS, and it's like I think it was Thomas Jefferson said, anyone that would rather be safe than free will have neither or deserve neither.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where we're at. People have to be willing to fight for their freedom because people paid for that stuff in blood. And it's one of those things where if you're willing to surrender your freedoms, whether it be freedom of speech or freedom to walk outside without a damn mask on, freedom to go into Walmart without a mask on. I mean, we have to fight for those rights, and there's strength in numbers. And I think we outnumber the people that are still asleep at the wheel in terms of uh, what's going on in our country.
Yeah,
And
and
in answer your question on the Ukraine Russia thing, I feel like it's a distraction. I feel that there's not going to be anything that really happens there other than it just being a distraction in the media.
so I 1000% agree with you. I'll preface it with that. I just based on the research that I've done, and trying to keep up with it because it changes all the time.
Hmm.
I think that it is a distraction. So I
Hmm.
agree with you there. I agree with you with the fact that our borders are in shambles. And the only thing that I'll
Hmm.
say, and I was thinking about this yesterday, the money that they've spent, probably the money that they've spent on free crack pipes for
No,
all these addicts, they probably could have finished the wall.
yeah. Well, Trump had everything set up for him. All he had to do was finish the construction, and
Yeah.
it's I here's what I think. Big picture. I don't. I think that this whole thing we've witnessed since last year is a wake up call for our country,
Mhm.
and we're going to be given the opportunity to take our country back, not with violence,
Mhm.
but with information. With Because we're in the middle of an information war. We're also, and that's what people don't wrap their hands or arms around. We are at war with
Mhm.
very evil forces, and it's first and foremost a spiritual war of good versus evil. Secondly, it's an information war where the media is lying their asses off to us. And if you're watching the mainstream media, you are completely asleep. You got to find alternate sources. You got to
Yeah.
verify all your information. And but I think the force that will take our country back is us getting control of the
Mhm.
information that's put out on the airwaves. And that's going to happen.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point. I was going to mention that earlier. A lot of people think that when you're fighting for your country, that it's literally grabbing your rifle and your American flag and your
Yep.
sidearm and going out and fighting. No, that's not that's not what that means. Now,
No.
there may or may not get to be a point to where we do that. But when people say fighting for their freedoms and their right, you you nailed it on the head whenever you said, it's the information, it's it
Yep.
or it may even be, taking a stance at your local school or district, start there and then start working your way out. But I think that we're at the point now where a lot's getting exposed and
Right.
a
Right.
lot of people are seeing that.
Well, I think it's about the truth, man. And the truth will set us free. Literally, we'll become free again when people recognize the truth.
Mhm.
And they've been lied to so much that they're well, the Bible talks about it, man. Lies become truth, and truth become lies, and good becomes evil, and evil becomes good. I mean, we're there, man. That's what we're right in the middle of.
Yeah.
And people have to wake up to that. I'm not saying it's end times, but I'm not saying it's not either. We
Right.
don't know. Um, what we do know is that there are anybody that thinks Joe Biden got 80 million votes is asleep at the wheel. Bottom line. I mean,
Especially
it
if you
doesn't
look at
take a
the rally turnouts. I mean,
yeah.
let's be honest.
If you can't get past that one, I'm sorry, you're completely asleep. Good luck. I hope you wake up in time
Yeah.
to have a seat at the table. Because but I think that the number of people awake, I think there's like a 30 30 30. 30 people are awake and active and speaking the truth. 30% of the people are awake but afraid to speak the truth, and they just want to comply and kind of get by
Mhm.
and live in the matrix. And then 30% are just completely asleep, and I hope to God they wake up at some point and they
Yeah.
believe all that crap they're being fed by the mainstream media.
Yeah. And I you can use the term red pilled or awake or however you want. It doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
I'm at the point now where the people that I care about and the people that are close to me, I have done everything I can in order
Mhm.
to, I don't want to say sway them because that's a bad word. It's like,
Mhm.
come over to the dark side. That's not what it's about. But I've done
Right.
everything in my power to give them information. And then
Right.
from that point, they can do what they want with it. Does that make sense?
Yep. And I've tried the same thing. I was a little aggressive about it, and I
Mhm.
kind of lost some people in the process because I was really, really vocal
Yeah.
last year about what I was seeing because it was alarming. I really felt like our country was going to fall into a civil war.
Yeah.
And nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. Uh, and As far as violence, I'm a peaceful person.
Mhm.
But good men have to do bad things once in a while,
Yeah,
but that's what the military is for, right?
right.
And I don't, I hope to God it doesn't come to violence. The only way I would ever use a weapon, and I have plenty of them, is if some wolf came knocking at my door trying to hurt me and my family or steal my property. Well, then it's a no-brainer. You're
Yeah.
going to be met with violence, but that's legitimate. That's justified. That's moral, actually.
That's a constitutional right.
Yeah, but to go out and commit violence just because you're pissed off and you
Right.
want to get some vengeance, I mean, that's wrong. We don't. That's not the way we're supposed to work.
Yeah.
We got to do this peacefully, and the only way to do it peacefully is to take over the information, which I think is what, like, True Social, I think, will be a big part of that.
Yeah.
Where the truth is getting out, and we wake up, that will make most of that last 30%. Because it's all about the numbers, I think. There'll be a point in time, they call it the Great Awakening, right? I know we're on the same page there,
Mhm.
where these evil people that have committed really atrocious things against our country, against our Constitution, and against just really evil things that we won't go into right now, but they'll have to go into hiding. The numbers are going to be so large of the people awake that they're just going to have to go into hiding.
Well, and I think that's, um, and people give me shit all the time because I follow Hollywood. And I don't mean, when I say that, I don't mean that I sit down every evening and, worship these people or, watch ET at 6 o'clock or
Right.
whatever. I don't, but
Yeah.
for me, Hollywood has always been a representation
Yeah.
for what's going on. So what you'll
Yep.
notice right now, and this is what people aren't talking about, and I'm sure that you've noticed this,
Yep.
but most
Yep.
people haven't noticed that they aren't making any big movies anymore.
Right.
Everything
Yeah.
is like what I would call a B-list movie right now, and the
Yep.
movies that are big are delayed 2 years or 3 years. I mean, and look, I'm very excited to see Top Gun 2. I'm sure that you
Yeah.
are
Me
too.
too. Yeah. Yeah.
But
It's been delayed forever. I'm surprised it hasn't been out yet.
yeah, and I joked the other day on Twitter, I'm excited to see Top Gun 2 whenever it's released in 2029. But
Well, the flying scenes in that are supposed to be phenomenal. The video they took was supposed to be just incredible.
well,
Um,
that could be a whole other podcast just
yeah.
talking about that. But I don't think a lot of people realize that the actors in those movies, they actually flew in the back
Yep.
seat.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
call them crazy, call them whatever, but I think I think it's a pretty cool movie.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But I agree with you. I agree 100% with what you said about Hollywood and even the music industry.
Mhm.
And you can take it into sports too. I mean, look at all this woke crap going on with the NBA and the NFL and even the MLB. And it's just, it turns my stomach. And these people are just put up on pedestals like they're
Yep.
heroes, and they're just not. They're not. Um, some of them are not really good people at all. And I think at the end of this, I call it a movie we're
Mhm.
watching. It's like I think it's a movie. When I say movie, I mean what's being put out on the mainstream media that people are just absorbing and believing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
And
it's
it's been happening for decades or
yeah,
centuries.
it's like a giant psyop, and so when that thing's over, when the movie ends, and it will end at some point, and the truth will come out, um, people that are asleep are going to find out that all their heroes, or most of their heroes, are really villains,
Yeah.
and some of the people they thought were villains are really heroes. It's going to blow their heads are going to explode when they find the truth. But that's the only thing that's going to set us all free, is the truth.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. You talk about the wake up process and all that, and the
Yeah.
people that aren't, and the people that are, and
Yeah.
and and look, you know, you can see the trends. I think you said it a few minutes ago. You can see the trends with Hollywood, with sports, with entertainment
Mhm.
in general, with sports
Mhm.
stars, and
Yep.
and look, I was, I mean, going back. I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was
Hmm.
bummed out to find out the things that I did about Tom Hanks, to find out the things that I did about Michael Keaton. I mean, I'll name drop them until I'm
Yeah.
blue in the face, but I think that it taught me not to idolize people, because one, it's a sin,
Mhm.
and two,
Right.
don't
Yeah.
put faith into people that have no personal contact with you whatsoever, because you're just going to be let
Right.
down.
Right. And I'm a forgiving person, and that's become a learned skill because I wasn't always that way. And I can, and we're supposed to pray for our enemies and love defeats evil and all that stuff that's in the Bible, which I believe. Um, it's hard to do though, man. It's easier said than done to to get there, especially when you know what they've done.
Mhm.
And I guess it comes to like there's that patch going around. There's a military patch that um, um, God will judge you. Will arrange the meeting, which is it's a military thing, right?
Mhm.
Um, but we're not here to judge people, but they will be judged.
Yeah.
And I think unless they get down on their knees and ask for forgiveness, it's free. You just got to ask for it and own your stuff. Kind of like my little jet thing.
Mhm.
You got to own your shit. And if
Right.
you're willing to own your shit, I think it's forgivable. Almost anything. Stuff against kids, I think that's pretty hard to forgive. At least for me as a human, I have a hard time getting to forgiveness on that. It's
Yeah.
just too evil.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
Uh,
that's one of those things that's not really our call to make, but,
no, it's not. Right. Like I said, I'm not. But justice will happen in this world,
mhm.
but it will happen in the next two, and that's really where the final judgment is. And, these people will not be judged well that have done these evil things, whether it be lie to us, commit treason against our country, um, or do very evil things to hurt people. Um, that's It's it's very frustrating because you can lose your way getting down a path of trying to figure out why it's like, God, why did you do this? And
Mhm.
I don't think it's God doing it personally. I think it's the other guy. Um, so um, yeah, it's but you can kind of lose your way if you get sucked up into that you want to call it resentment, you want to call it you want vengeance, you want justice, whatever it is you want to call it. It's toxic. It kind of eats you up inside. And I just try to live in the truth and trust God's plan for me. And you just take it one day at a time. And I've been handed some lemons. You try and turn it into lemonade. Sometimes you can't, but you just roll with the punches. You don't surrender, man. You don't give up.
Yeah, I think that kind of brings it full circle, man. We talked a lot about, just having the courage to do the right thing. We talked about what it means to be a
Yeah,
man. We talked about
yeah,
Christian values, and we just talked about being a good person and trying our best to be
yeah,
forgiving. Um,
yep.
so I think that that's a good place to end, man. Is
Yeah.
there any parting words you got for our first podcast?
Man, it was a pleasure getting to know you because
Yeah.
we've been chatting on Twitter a little bit, and now I finally get to talk to you. And yeah, you're as cool a dude as I thought you were, man.
Well, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy that loves this country and
Well, I can
just want
tell.
to do the right thing.
You put your heart out there, brother, and keep on doing what you're doing. I wish your fiance's name is Ash. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So Ashley's actually in the other room right now, so she's waiting on me to
Well,
finish that up so I can send it to her and she can give it a listen.
I wish you guys the best, and God bless you guys. And we'll get through this turbulent time we're in, my friend, and we'll come out the other side and hopefully get to meet in person someday. But I'd love to chat with you again whenever you're ready.
Yeah, for sure, Jolly. I appreciate you being on, and I'll be in touch with you soon. Okay.
Roger that. Take care, my friend.
All right, you too. See you, bye.
See ya.